Welcome to New Connection, where you can tune in and grow. I'm your host, Vicki Thompson. You may be familiar with New Connection magazine for conscious living, which has been enjoyed by readers in the Pacific Northwest for more than 17 years. Now we're excited to bring New Connection to life in your home. On New Connection, we welcome authors, practitioners, and visionaries to share new ideas for alternative health, spirituality, and personal growth. Today I'd like to welcome to New Connection Gary Zukav and Linda Francis, who are the founders of the Seed of the Soul Institute. Through best-selling books and workshops, this dynamic couple teaches people worldwide how to create authentic power. Learn how you can bring more joy into your life, move into your full potential, and give the gifts that you were born to share. Gary and Linda, it is so wonderful to have you on New Connection today.
Thank you, Vicki. It's a real joy to be here.
It's so good to be with you.
And you bring such a beautiful, loving energy in, and I can really feel how much you've worked to create authentic power. But just like anyone who starts out in a business, you started out as a small-time author, and you had a book, Seed of the Soul, and to your surprise, it became a New York Times best-selling book and was on there for 3 years. How did you start this journey?
Oh, I actually wrote a book before that called The Dancing Wooly Masters,
Right.
which was about quantum physics, and I'm a non-physicist, but I became fascinated with quantum physics after I was invited to a meeting of physicists at the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, and I asked all the physicists there to help me present physics, and that's how I started writing, and I loved it. Then, in 1989, I wrote a book called The Seed of the Soul. Now, that was a book that was very special to me and continues to be. And it did pretty well. A lot of people bought it and read it. But around 98 or 2000, Oprah Winfrey and I started to do a series of shows. And we did about one a month for about a year and a half. And that just exploded, The Seed of the Soul. 3 million or 6 million people read it. And it was one of the greatest joys that I have to be able to share about authentic power in this way. I had no idea when I wrote this book that so many people would be interested in it. But I do realize, Vicki, that it is not so much my ability as a writer or what was in the Seed of the Soul. It was what was in the Seed of the Soul, and it was also the resonance that millions of people now have with what was in the seed. It is in the Seed of the Soul, and that is the discovery that a new human consciousness is being born, and in a surprising way, with surprising potential. But the big news is we're in new territory now, and it calls for awareness, and it calls for responsibility, and that's the message I feel that made the Seed of the Soul so wonderfully popular with Oprah and with so many readers.
So how are we each contributing to the change of the human consciousness?
The change is happening. We don't have to make it happen. This is an expansion of our perception beyond the limitations of the 5 senses. We're starting to become aware of ourselves as more than bodies, more than minds. We have another sensory system. Intuition is part of it. Having a sense of your life is meaningful is part of it. Being able to know things about other people that your 5 senses couldn't tell you is part of it. We don't have to develop that. It is happening. But it's bringing with it a new understanding of who we are, why we are, and what power is. We used to think of power as the ability to manipulate and to control. That doesn't work anymore. It's now counterproductive. And a new understanding of power is emerging with multisensory perception. That is the alignment of your personality with your soul. And that means with the highest part of yourself that you can possibly reach for, the part that wants harmony and cooperation and sharing and reverence for life. Now, how you contribute to that is entirely a matter of your choice. And that, in fact, is what Linda and I came to talk about.
So you talk about a multisensory human being. How is that different from just our 5 senses and how we perceive the world physically?
When you have a hunch that you should have a certain guest and maybe you shouldn't have another, that's multisensory perception. When you look at someone who looks kind, but you have a sense not to trust that person, that's multisensory perception. When you have a glimpse that your life has a meaning, that your life is not random, that's multisensory perception. When you have an experience now and then of encountering someone, even if it's a rider on the streetcar, and in that moment, there's a meaningful connection between you that you can't understand, but you know it, it's real, it's there, that's multisensory perception.
But I was thinking of an example I could give. When I met you, I had some multisensory perception, some intuition about that there was some connection being made between us that I didn't understand, and so I wanted to follow that. And I also had other experiences when you were speaking at an event. I had information, I was getting information about you, and I think that's a really good example. Information about you opening your heart, information about you being frightened to be in a relationship, things like that I was being given that I had no way of knowing. And so I think that's a good example also of multisensory perception.
It's a wonderful example.
Yeah.
And when you receive something that's meaningful to you, when it registers in some way, it's for you to decide whether or not that is worth your paying attention to or ignoring, because you can see something that's multisensory, for example, and then decide to ignore it, and like a dream it will fade away, and you might remember that you saw something or experienced something that was meaningful, but you can't remember what it was. Or you can register it, you can make a point of remembering it and thinking, how can this help me? What is this telling me? How can I use this? How can I use this to contribute to the world? How can I use this to challenge my anger when I'm angry? Or how can I use this the next time I'm in a power struggle and I don't want to be relating that way to the person I'm in the struggle with? And so what you contribute to the new human species is for you to decide. You either now begin to grow spiritually, which means create authentic power, or you don't. If you don't get judged by the universe, but you don't change. And the frightened parts of your personality, which means the parts that are angry, jealous, vengeful, that feel superior, that need to please, all of those continue to do what they're doing, and you continue to encounter the painful consequences of them.
So it sounds like in creating authentic power, you offer workshops. It's also a part of the books that you've co-authored together. And I think you were saying you had 4 best-selling books that you've gone on to write and you've written together.
Exactly.
Authentic power, what is it, and how can we learn to create it and be more authentic in the world together?
Well, authentic power is basically changing yourself rather than trying to change everyone else. So if you have parts of you that are angry or jealous, as Gary was talking about, in my case I felt very inferior to people, many people, and even Gary when I met him. So I really needed to change that in me so I could give my gifts, so I could do the things that I want to do in the world. And that's a good example of that. So what I did, instead of letting those parts of me that felt inferior or that felt jealous control me anymore, I became aware of them and I began to change them in me. I began to challenge those parts of me that were doing that, and it's really such an amazing way, because before I would get jealous and blame the other person. It was their fault because I was feeling that way, or if I was feeling inferior, I'd feel like a victim. Rather than changing myself, my life continued along the same path. So when I began to change myself, everything began to change. When I began to change parts of me that were in control of me because I wasn't aware. So I began to really practice being aware of my emotions, being aware of my thoughts, being aware of my intuition, knowing the difference between when I had a thought that had to do with fear and a thought that came from my intuition, or a thought that came from a loving part of me. So I began to change my life that way. So in other words, that's creating authentic power. That's exactly what we teach about.
Authentic power is the alignment of your personality with your soul. That's what your viewers saw on the screen. Now, what was Linda, well, how was what Linda said related to aligning your personality with your soul? In every way. For example, when a frightened part of your personality that's angry or jealous or vengeful or frightened or superior or inferior is active, how can you create harmony? How can you share from your heart? How can you cooperate? How can you revere life instead of exploiting life, trying to take from life? You can't. So in order to align your personality with your soul, you need to become aware of all of the parts of your personality. You have to illuminate all of the rooms in your mansion and decide which ones you're going to completely redecorate and which ones you're going to keep the way they are. The frightened parts of your personality need redecorating. They don't serve you any longer. The loving parts of your personality, the parts that are patient, caring, gentle, considerate, grateful, these are the rooms to keep and to cultivate and to make better. Doing that is creating authentic power. So when you set the intention to create authentic power, every part of your personality that doesn't want to, that gets angry, that feels jealous, that judges others, that judges yourself, I'm so stupid, for example, all of those come to the foreground of your consciousness for you to challenge. And you challenge them by becoming familiar with them. That's where emotional awareness enters the picture. You use your body to see what they feel like, so you can recognize them. You recognize their thoughts. You recognize their intentions after a while. And then, instead of doing what they would have you do, and what you have done habitually, do something else. Do something constructive. In other words, if you feel like withdrawing emotionally, stay present, consciously challenging that part of your personality while it hurts to feel it. If you would habitually shout, don't shout. I know a lot about anger, so I know that it's a big step to feel so enraged that you can hardly trembling, and I want to shout. But instead, I can control myself enough to stand there and tremble rather than say something in anger, because I'm determined not to speak in anger. That's a phase that I went through. It's a phase that everyone goes through, becoming familiar with the frightened part of your personality that is painful in the moment and not doing what it wants to do consciously, because you don't want to strengthen it.
How did that work for you? Because you talked about when you met Gary. So it sounds like, did you meet Gary when he was giving workshops and you were a participant?
Yeah,
or?
Gary had written the Dancing Woolly Masters, which I read in 1979. I hadn't met Gary then, but the book was really, really important to me. And especially when he was talking about what physicists were seeing that was so different, like they were seeing that everything is interconnected. Well, I knew that inside me, but I'd never talked to anybody about it, so it was wonderful to read that book, and for many reasons. And then when I read The Seed of the Soul in '89, I picked it up because I saw Gary's name on the book, and I thought, anything he writes, I want to read it. So I picked it up, started reading it, and it was so amazing to me because what was in the book was exactly what I knew. What I knew inside was so for me. But what I didn't know how to actually practice, how to create authentic power. I knew it was the right thing. I knew I was multisensory. I was beginning to learn more about that. But I wanted to really create authentic power all the time because I was still pleasing. I felt inferior. And so when I met Gary, I felt so inferior, I didn't think I could even speak to him. It was really difficult for me to do that because I thought, oh, he's written all these wonderful books, and who am I to even, speak to him? And he was at an event giving a talk when I first met him. And when I knew we were being connected, as I spoke about earlier, I chose to challenge that part of me that felt so inferior. I decided I was not going to let it run my life anymore. So I went forward to see if there was anything to do in this relationship, and we decided we would create a spiritual partnership, a partnership between equals for the purpose of spiritual growth. And as you can see, partnership between equals means I had to feel equal. So I was really working on changing that for me. And it was so amazing because we began to really live what was in the seed of the soul. We began to practice it on a daily basis, all the time, changing myself rather than trying to manipulate and control Gary. When I'm in a power struggle, instead of blaming him, saying, I need to look at me and why this is going on in me so that I can be connected no matter what is happening. So we kept working and working with that, and then we wanted to share it. we wanted to share with other people. I wanted Gary to be able to share things, and then I began to see that I had a gift to be able to support people in experiences that would allow them to understand more about themselves, to really create authentic power in their life. So we began working together to do that. So that's how our workshops began, because we realized reading a book is fantastic. It's wonderful. But to actually experience and practice and deepen your practice with other people who are doing the same thing is the very best. That's why we do our workshops. But we also do a 3-year program that we've been doing for about 8 years now. Mm. And it's been the most, besides my spiritual...
because we're slow learners.
Besides my spiritual partnership with Gary, that was amazing, you know, to begin to grow spiritually that way. But this program of having people ongoingly working on their growth for a number of years. In fact, they didn't want to quit at 3 years, so people keep coming on because it's so exciting to be able to work together as spiritual partners. And I've learned more than I could possibly imagine from having interactions with Gary and other people that are my spiritual partners.
So it sounds like in creating spiritual partnership, there's the intimate partnership, but then there's also a friendship that you create with others who you're co-creating with through the program?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, it's more than a friendship, because often when people use the word friendship, they really mean someone who's in agreement, whoever's in agreement with me. But I'm really talking about being able to say things that are difficult to say, saying things so that you learn about yourself. Like if you see you're angry with your friend, you look at yourself and see what's going on with you. Or if your friend has done something and you see something about them that could help them to grow, then you can talk about things like that rather than just kind of pushing everything under the rug. So a spiritual partnership, you're right, it's not just an intimate partnership between a man and a woman, two people. It's more than that. We have spiritual partnerships with our children and our grandchildren and other people, because it's so important, you know, to be able to grow together in authentic ways.
So if you're talking with a spiritual partner and you feel that you're saying something in love, how do you know that you're speaking with love? Because sometimes we can feel that we're speaking in love, but someone can have a totally different experience of what we're saying.
Exactly. Well, that's when becoming aware of your own emotions is really important. You notice what you're feeling inside your body as you're speaking, and if you have frightened parts, you know, parts of your personality come up that really have a second agenda, and that's why you're speaking to them, you'll notice it in your body. And maybe you don't, let's say you don't notice it in your body. If you have a spiritual partner and they notice it, they can bring it up to you, which is so great, because maybe you don't see it, but you want to, but it's so familiar to you to act like that, you don't notice it. So that's when a spiritual partnership is so helpful, because if your spiritual partner can say, you know, I'm just wondering if there was a frightened part of your personality active when you were speaking.
Well, your spiritual partner will tell you what he or she thinks.
Maybe happening.
It's not necessarily what that person knows is happening in you, but what they think might be happening in you and might be helpful for you to consider. There's always a good way that you can tell whether they're saying something that might be helpful. If you get irritated or annoyed or defensive or reactive, that's a signal to you that you've just heard something that could be helpful for you to look at.
That's a big truth.
Yes, it is. Yes. It is.
And anyone can experiment with it. That's why Linda and I don't present anything as a dogma or a belief system that we say we want you to accept, but only as a way of looking at the world that we've come to look at the world. And we offer this way of looking at the world for you to experiment with. Take it as a hypothesis. Become a scientist of the soul, a seeker of truth. See if it works for you, and if it does, then use it. Be responsible for using it. Authentic power, by the way, is an experience of meaning, fulfillment, engagement in the present moment. You lack for nothing. You know that you're alive for a reason. You know what you're doing has to do with that reason. You are fulfilled and fulfilling. that is the experience of authentic power.
Mm.
And many people have had it briefly, transiently, maybe writing a book like I have sometimes, or caring for a sick friend, or producing a television show, and you know that you're what an athlete would call in the zone, or a musician would call in the groove, or an artist would call working with the energy of the work.
Mm-hmm.
But you know that you're doing what you should be doing. There's no fear present. That's authentic power. And it can be created ongoingly.
Right.
And that is our new evolutionary path. And that is what we came on the show to say.
And that's exactly what we share with people. That's what we teach. That's what our life is about.
So how do I get that? How can I get authentic power and just have it be more of a natural part of my life rather than struggling with it?
You have to create it. You have to create it. You can't meditate it or pray it or visualize it or affirm it into being. All of those modalities are helpful if you use them to challenge a frightened part of your personality. But the operative dynamic is always you intervening consciously in an otherwise unconscious process and changing the course of your life, changing the consequences you create. In the East, that's called karma. Mm-hmm. Becoming an artist in your life.
Yeah. Mm. But practically, we teach very simple tools to support people. We give people guidelines, and we also offer ongoing events and things on our website that support people. But our workshops and events really support people. For instance, we have a 5-day event in Portland, actually at Mount Hood, that we do every summer in July, and that is such a powerful way to work with everyone, because we get to work together on our spiritual partnership, teach the tools, practice the tools, deepen your spiritual growth, and then go home and practice it, continue practicing it with the guidelines that we offer and the simple tools. It's so exciting. And ongoing relationships with those spiritual partners that you meet and that you create at your home.
What would be something simple that our viewers today, if they wanted to practice one simple tool of authentic power, what could they do today?
I would suggest this. Go to our website, which is seatofthesoul.com.
Mm-hmm.
S-E-A-T, like what you sit on, the S-O-U-L.com.
Mm-hmm.
On the home page, there are spiritual partnership guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
Print them out, and read them. And if you resonate with them, put them on your fridge, on your mirror, carry them in your purse, carry them in your wallet. And they have to do with commitment, with courage, with compassion, with conscious communication and action. They have to do with developing emotional awareness and making responsible choices, knowing what your intention really is. That was the question you asked earlier.
Yes.
How do I know what my intention really is when I'm saying something or doing something?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a simple first step. Go to seatofthesoul.com, print the spiritual partnership guidelines, read them, and then begin to experiment with those that resonate with you. If they all resonate with you, experiment with all of them. Read the books like The Seat of the Soul and The Heart of the Soul, Emotional Awareness. Do the exercises in that one. Don't just read the text. And then, as Linda suggested, come to an event. We have a wonderful event called The Path to Authentic Power that she mentioned, which is on Mount Hood every July.
Yeah.
It's usually, it is always in the last week or so of July. That is a wonderful event. I recommend that to everyone.
Yeah.
So these are steps you can
Sometimes
take.
it's in different locations where we give our workshops, so you'd have to check on our schedule on our website. But the thing is, if they print out the guidelines, what can happen is that they can check with their intuition and see what guideline they might want to work with that day.
Mm-hmm.
To just see what is it that would really support me right now in doing what I need to do next to deepen my spiritual growth.
Here's a guideline. One of the guidelines is, take responsibility for my experiences. No blaming.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, now think about that.
That's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's a challenge to a frightened part of your personality.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because most people feel that when they are experiencing a difficult experience or emotion, something outside of them caused it. And they try to change that person or situation so they won't feel that painful emotion any longer. That is the pursuit of external power. That's manipulation and control. That's what doesn't work any longer. If instead you look inside yourself at what has been triggered, not at the trigger, but at what has been triggered in you, and become familiar with that and challenge it so that no one will be able to trigger it in the future, that's creating authentic power. And that is our future.
So it sounds like it takes courage to look within and to see if you're triggered, then that you have the power and the strength to look inside and to illuminate those rooms in your castle that might be kind of dark, or that you don't go there that often, but just kind of grab you sometimes.
Vicki, I was a Green Beret officer. I was in Vietnam. I led combat patrols in top secret areas. That took courage of one kind, but not as much courage as stopping when I'm in a power struggle, say with Linda, and deciding not to do that anymore for me.
Well, the two of you together have just brought such wonderful energy here today, and we're so thankful that you came and joined us on New Connection. And so thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So good to be with you, Vicki.
Wonderful, thank you. You can learn more about creating authentic power at our website at newconnectionjournal.com. Join us next time on New Connection, where you can tune in and grow.